Can a Catholic woman be ambitious about the things of the world, like business? This may seem like an absurd question to even ask. Most people would say, of course they can. They're no different than men in this regard. My guests today are two women who have met success in the business world and who face the question of how to use their gifts in the world and in the home. Like tens of millions of women around the world, they've wrestled with the question of balancing work life and family life. Elise Gallagher and Taryn DeLong lead the organization Catholic Women in Business. They join us today on the Catholic Entrepreneur Podcast to discuss the topic Catholic Women and Ambition, Thriving in Your Vocation. Stay with us. I want to thank our show sponsor, Mission Advantage. If you are trying to place a senior level position in your organization, your Catholic nonprofit or for-profit, Mission Advantage is an absolutely great solution for you. You can find their contact information in the show notes. Ladies, good to be with you.
Thanks, Matt. It's good to be here.
We're excited to talk to you today.
Well, thanks for making the time. I know even, in your busy lives and all of our busy lives, even making time like this can be difficult. So thank you for doing that. Elise Gallagher, right now you are a mother. You're also the COO of a law firm. And Taryn, you not too long ago were the managing editor of an online publication. You're a mother soon of a second child. So I just wanted to give a little context. We're going to have your bios in our show notes. So our topic today is Catholic Women and Ambition. Both of you recently wrote a book called Holy Ambition, Thriving as a Catholic Woman at Work and at Home. And this was born from an apostolate that you ladies co-lead. Tell us about Catholic Women in Business, what it is, why it is, what need you're serving.
Great. Thank you, Matt, again, for having us on. We're thrilled to be here. I started Catholic Women in Business in 2018, and I did so because I really needed a home and community. I had just gotten married a year prior and was newly into my career. I was about 3 or 4 years in. I was running a startup, and I couldn't find the other Catholic women who were working, and the secular people that I was working with in my workspace, they weren't, really pursuing the Lord. And so I wanted to find that Catholic woman who felt called to work in some capacity while also discovering what it meant for their faith to inform their work. And so I started with a blog, and it has grown to a community across the world. We have over 7,000 women in our Facebook group, and we have virtual events. We just launched in-person events, and it has been incredible to see our community grow over the last 6 or 7 years.
Clearly, 7,000 women involved. You've struck a nerve.
Yes, we hear frequently from women who are discovering us for the first time that they've been looking, just like Elise was, for a community like this that really just drives home to us that we're meeting a need in the church.
What is the need that you believe you've addressed with this?
The workplace for women has evolved rapidly over the last 30 years with technology advancements, with the internet. Work has looked very different for millennials, Taryn and I are both millennials, than it was for our moms or grandmas. And so I really feel that support is needed because we're all trying to figure this out. What does it mean to work from home? What does it mean to work full-time outside of the home? And how are we integrating our family into our work and vice versa?
Women, we have this sexual asymmetry. We bear the children. Some of us nurse the children. For a lot of us, the caregiving, after infancy is also more on the woman, and it's partly because of the way our body is designed. That does reflect some spiritual truths as well about who we are as people. And there's research that was not done by Catholics that supports this idea, that women tend to be more collaborative. We tend to be more empathetic, like you said. We tend to be more emotionally intelligent. And I say this not to degrade men, because I'm married to a man who is probably the most emotionally intelligent person that I've ever known. But speaking in terms of just averages, comparing men and women, women do have these interpersonal skills that I do think stems from our biology.
Yeah, I mean, that leads me nicely into a question that I had queued up. What do you think are the unique gifts that women bring to the workplace specifically?
Certainly Catholic women talk a lot about spiritual motherhood. And I think too often it's kind of poo-pooed as sort of the thing that you get to do if you don't have your own children. But the truth is, the reality is that spiritual motherhood is something that every woman is called to, whether or not we have children. And I mean, you can look at women like Mother Teresa, who never bore a child, but the whole world called her mother because of who she was. Our bodies are made to bear children, but our souls are also made to care for other people. Children, adults, everyone we come into contact with. And that is the type of leadership style that we bring into the workplace.
Let's talk a little bit about the gender differences because even if it's politically incorrect, these things are true. And so I think we do everyone a service by addressing them and putting them in their proper context. What do you think women can learn from men in the workplace, and what can men learn from women in the workplace?
What I've learned from men in the workplace is confidence. The ability to step into a room and take ownership of the words coming out of my mouth, the presentation that I'm giving, the directive that I'm forecasting, whatever it may be, even though I may not feel great that day, maybe I'm tired or, distracted, having confidence in myself, even though I may not be perfect, to lead. And I'm very grateful to have learned that. I think as far as what men can learn from women, I think we've talked about empathy a lot. We've talked about the idea that women can call men to rest, to take pauses more throughout their lives and their careers. And really understanding that although, yes, I may be a leader in my company, that ultimately God's in control. I mean, God is in control of this company, of the economy, of the world. And that's not saying to be passive and to just sit back and, let it happen, whatever's going to happen, but to trust more that the Lord's leading my life, my business, and that, his will be done.
Ladies, in our pre-interview, one of you said, working outside the home or from the home does not, and this is the key word, exclude women from being homemakers, but also that wives and mothers are called to have their vocation rightly ordered.
I do constantly discern whether I'm still called to this work. That's something that I think as Catholics, we know as married Catholics that we're called to natural family planning, right? Which is cyclical. Every single month as a couple, you are discerning whether you are ready to welcome another child into your family. And I apply that same approach to my work. Am I still called to work at this particular way at this company in this season? It's a unique challenge as a woman to constantly be aware and open to the Lord's calling and discerning that.
I think this cyclical nature of femininity is a gift that we can bring to the workplace too, because women, whether it's just because of our menstrual cycle or because of pregnancy, childbirth, postpartum, we are forced to take times to rest.
Would it be safe to say, ladies, that women face the question of how to juggle the demands of work and family in the average workplace maybe more than men?
I think so, because as Taryn said, naturally, the caring of children falls onto women biologically. And so, yes, I've had to get very creative with how do I nurse? How do I tend to the home while also being present in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, I have to be attentive as a husband and a father, clearly. But from the word go, it does seem like it's not an equal playing field in the sense that you physically bear children. There probably is a giftedness that is God-given in the realm of empathy. Like I've even heard, ladies, and correct me if this is wrong, that both of you, Elise and Taryn, have like a third more right brain, left brain connectors than I do to be able to read faces. We do kind of approach the world differently. We do have different experiences. This is less of a question for we men. Would you say Am I close? Am I stepping on a third rail that I shouldn't step on?
No, I think that's true. John Paul II spoke about how the physical tells us something about the rest of us and about the soul. Edith Stein called it the feminine soul, a shelter in which other souls may unfold, which I think is just a beautiful way to summarize this idea of spiritual motherhood.
I've known of Edith Stein, and I know that her writings are deep and profound, but you clearly have thought of this. Can you apply it to this question of women and ambition?
Yes. I mean, I don't even really have to apply it because she did, years ago, before really the sexual revolution and some of these conversations had started. Edith Stein was already thinking about it. And she wrote a series of essays and talks on women that are now collected into a volume called Essays on Women. And I think should be required reading of everyone who's interested in this topic of gender, because she nails it, and she has the answers to so many questions that we're considering now. So she, and then John Paul II, who of course coined the term feminine genius and drew a lot on Edith Stein's work, they believed that Edith Stein said every profession in which a woman's soul comes into its own and which can be formed by a woman's soul is an authentic woman's profession. So she believed there weren't jobs for men and jobs for women. There were jobs. And if a woman was using her feminine genius, what John Paul II would later call feminine genius, if she was able to use that in the workplace, and that's where God was calling her to, then that was a woman's profession. John Paul II, he famously in his letter to women, he said, "Thank you, women who work." He believed that women have something important to contribute to the world. And of course, he writes beautifully about motherhood. He believed that mothers have vital work to do in the home, but he also wrote about the gifts that femininity can make to building the culture outside of the home. And part of that is in business and the workplace.
Taryn, it really would be great if you could again unpack that quote that you mentioned with Edith Stein, because that was pretty profound. In a sense, that's a money line for this whole show. Can you share that again?
She said, every profession in which a woman's soul comes into its own and which can be formed by a woman's soul is an authentic woman's profession.
Yeah, that's really pretty beautiful and awesome. What do you think the business world would be missing without the feminine gift?
I'm going to go to John Paul II again. He wrote that women who work make an indispensable contribution to the growth of a culture which unites reason and feeling, to a model of life ever open to the sense of mystery, to the establishment of economic and political structures ever more worthy of humanity. So I think that we're seeing this now as artificial intelligence is rising, as companies become more and more focused on growth at any cost, as we have wars raging around the world. And I want to be careful not to say that's all men's fault, because this is not, men are doing all the bad things and women are doing all the good things. But because of that feminine soul that is a shelter for other souls, women bring a more human element into the company. Women are really focused on how are we taking care of employees? How are we taking care of customers? I think as technology grows, that's going to become more and more important.
Yeah, the more technologically reliant and perhaps the coldness that comes along with that we need the human touch, which potentially seems to be intuitive and reflexive more in the feminine gift.
Yes, beautifully put.
Okay. So let's go back for those who've been listening and clearly see that we're unpacking quotes from the Pope and Edith Stein and just kind of our own experience supporting this concept of wherever one's gifts can be born. Some might be getting a little nervous, like, oh, okay, yeah, but what are the ramifications of this? So can you comment again, ladies, on the rightly ordered concept? What would be your position on the issue of ambition and women specifically manifest in the business workplace?
I'm not going to quote him as beautifully as Taryn is quoted in this episode, but a quote from Pope Francis had the sentiment that each person was a dream that God created into existence. Our God is a God of dreaming, and our God has placed, as we're made in his image and likeness, has placed that same ability to dream in our hearts. Whether you are dreaming of making your home more structured and have a better routine, or you're dreaming of starting a company or of moving into a new role within a company, God has placed that calling on your heart. Now, I want to preface that with, I so value spiritual direction and discernment. If you are married, you're called to discern that with your husband. And it has, in my marriages, this has always been a co-decision and discernment of where both of our careers are called to go. That discernment's not easy, but it is worth it. And we seek outside counsel, and we take all of that input and prayer and place it in front of the Lord and ask, tell us where to go. We are his apostles. We have that calling on our hearts right now in this season to work outside of the home, and he's allowed that. Now, I know women who have that calling, and the Lord right now is saying, wait, this is not the season to work outside the home or start something from home. And that's okay too. The Lord has a unique calling and path for holiness on each of our lives. And we are called to be extremely close to his sacred heart to hear that calling.
When you start from that place of discernment and prayer and growing in closeness with God, that helps you try to avoid the temptation to make work or family into an idol, which I think is something that a lot of us have fallen prey to. I know I have, where work becomes the ultimate good in your life or family becomes the ultimate good in your life. My career has been an idol in my life in the past. My motherhood has been an idol. And it's an easy trap to fall into because work is good, motherhood is good. But when you're starting from that place of what does God want for my life, not what do I want for my life, then that's when you are able to rightly order all of these things that he's calling you to.
Some would look at the past 60, 70 years and contend that because of a pretty dramatic movement of women into the workforce, the culture has suffered. The culture as a whole seems to have paid some price in this regard. Part
of the problem is that we have this pendulum swing. So, in the 50s, women who could afford to, they basically were homemakers and full-time caregivers of their children. And then we had this push to get women out of the home and into the workplace. And it went too far. There's been a change, I think, and we now have devalued the work that women do in the home, the work that goes into caring for children and caring for a home. And I think that has damaged the culture. I think that plays a part in the culture of death that Catholics talk about a lot. I think that plays a part in devaluing the life of unborn children, of devaluing motherhood.
Ladies, I think we're going to polarize, not intentionally, two groups. There will be the feminist who will choke at the idea that there should be any restriction or even the question of whether a woman should be able to exert her desire, her dreams in whatever work way she so desires. Then you would have the traditionalist who would maybe contend that no, this is throwing off the timing belt of maybe the family and maybe even the wider society. Kind of where have you personally landed, and where do you think the church lands on this question?
These two groups that you mentioned are, like all of us, so loud on the internet now that it used to be that you might know what your family and your close friends, maybe your neighbor, thought of the way you were living your life. But now you have a seemingly endless chorus of women on Instagram, on LinkedIn, telling you women have to work because it's a good example for their daughters. Women have to stay home because otherwise, they're just paying someone else to raise their children, and that's no good for the family. You have women telling you what type of work you should do. You have women telling you how your house should look like. And it's so important. And every few months, I think I reset app limits on my phone so that I can shut out those voices. What is God calling me to? What does my husband think? What does our family need? That's pretty much it.
One of my favorite things about Catholic Women in Business and our Facebook group is that we have women from 21 years of age to 65, 70 years of age. So we get the wisdom and experience of women who have gone through many different stages of their career and their life.
Ladies, I forget who spoke of it when we did our pre-interview, but you spoke about two simultaneous realities going on in the minds and hearts of women. There was a desire for a career, but then there was simultaneous regret that more than a few women who chose careers then had, when they looked back and maybe marriage didn't become their reality or children. Is this a common theme going on simultaneously in the heads of women, either in college or shortly after they get out of college? I mean, I don't face those realities from the word go, but I have wondered whether women are kind of simultaneously always living in two camps.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, my sister is in her early 30s. She just graduated from med school last year and is serving an underprivileged community up in Pennsylvania. And she's doing a fantastic job. She's doing exactly what the Lord's called her to do. And yet she's single and trying to find that, her significant other and start a family. And I have friends who, didn't get married till 36, 37. And it wasn't necessarily because they were working. They were trying to be very open to dating and finding a good Catholic husband. But the Lord just didn't allow that to happen until later than they desired in their later 30s. And so the Lord's will is a mystery. I think as Catholic women, what I would say is, always be open to where the Lord is calling you in this season of life. However, there's also practical implications. There are women who cannot be supported by their family and need to work. There are also Catholic women who, are maybe called to other things before they get married. And so I think it's really case by case basis.
Yeah. I mean, I have thoughts on this question just as someone who didn't get married until I was 31 and who was recently told that I will officially be having a geriatric pregnancy a week before my due date because I'm going to be turning 35. And I mean, I frequently think, I wish that I had started all of this younger. You have to kind of realize that God's called you to a life he's called you to. And whether it was his active will or his permissive will, he willed that you are where you are now. And so I wouldn't have the husband that I have if I'd got married at 22 because we weren't even living in the same state then. That means I wouldn't have the children that I have now. We just have to stop putting all of this pressure on ourselves to either, get to the job that we want before we have kids, or to get, have kids right away, or to meet the right person right away, or to, make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row. Because ultimately, and Elise and I come back to this over and over again in our book, it's not about your timeline. It's not about what you think your life should look like. It's about what God has planned for you. And it's about your discernment of that plan.
What would be your counsel to a young woman who clearly has gifts that will bless the world in some way, either through ministry or through work, but is having internal conflicts, her simultaneous desire to be married and mother? And then the corollary to that is, what do you say to the young woman who is in the world but really would like to not be working in the world, but is feeling the pressure of the world to work?
I always encourage women to get mentors and coaches. Something that really helped me in my early 20s as I was adjusting to the working world and then getting married was having other women who were 5, 10, 15 years ahead of me in work and in family life, who were able to give me a bit of a roadmap of what their lives have looked like. And I could piece together what I felt like the Lord was calling me to, my family to. During grad school, lived with a family. They're a wonderful Catholic family near Washington, D.C., who had 5 little boys under 7, I think. And I nannied with them, lived with them. And I just got to see, another way of a Catholic family living. I think sometimes parents forget that once we go through college, we kind of are removed from that family life. We have to, as I know, as a Catholic wife and mom, I've had to relearn and reshape what family life is going to look like for my particular family. And so having the resources and mentors and mentees and surrounding myself with those people were extremely helpful, and they still are.
What do you say to a woman who is feeling pressure in the world to work, but really would prefer to target all those energies towards husband, family, children?
That's hard. I've been there myself. The first thing I would say is that when the time comes and you've discerned this with your husband, that you can be confident in your discernment and your decision. And then, I've said this repeatedly because it's something that I struggle with. You have to shut out those other voices. You just have to. And I think it's hard for me because I have a foot in both worlds. And so I feel like I kind of hear it all, but you have to stand firm in what you believe is best for you and your family. I'll also say that women go through seasons. Some women go through, their entire lives where they don't work outside the home and they're staying home with their family. I was raised by a mom who stayed home with us and then went back to work and then stayed home and then went back to work just based on what the family needed. The workplace is starting to be set up more for that kind of fluidity. It's starting to be acknowledged more that moms have phenomenal skills. I'm becoming a much better communicator because I'm the mother of a 3-year-old. It is unlike listening to anybody else talk that I've ever talked to. And so if you ever do go back to work, you have these great skills. And if you don't, you have these great skills and you're using them in your family. You're using them maybe in the PTA. You're using them in the ways that God's calling you to. And that's what's really important is what gifts has God given you and how is he calling you to use them? It feels trite to say, shut out those other voices because I know how hard it is. I do. But ultimately, that's what you have to do.
Ladies, what's next for Catholic Women in Business?
So we just launched, as of this month, Catholic Women Business in-person events and meetups. So we've been contemplating this for years. We started a few years ago with virtual meetups once a month, and now we're going to be moving those to in-person events. We have a list of tons of women who have signed up so far, which is very exciting. And so we'll be launching that this summer.
Very good, very good. So Taryn, DeLong, Elise Gallagher, thank you very much. Love the conversation. A lot of different points made. There's much that people I think will take away from this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. It's been really great talking to you.
It's been a joy. Thank you.
So one thing that I marvel about all the time, and it's a Catholic principle that I'm going to say often, I've already said it often, when God became man, it was an affirmation of the created world. Therefore, the church has comments on all aspects of life, and I believe God's truth is ready to touch all aspects of God's life. So even questions that perhaps this, to some extent, is controversial, the church has an opinion, and everyone, I can say this with great confidence, you're almost always going to find the church's opinion on all matters ends up in the healthy center. Now, the world may think the church's center is too far to the right or too far to the left, but no, it's usually the authentic center. And I think a lot of the points made today by Elise and Taryn, when we slow down and we kind of listen in a distilled manner as to what is being said, is the proper Catholic balance, to which I say amen to that. I want to thank our show sponsor, Mission Advantage. If you are trying to place a senior level position in your organization, your Catholic nonprofit or for-profit, Mission Advantage is an absolutely great solution for you. You can find their contact information in the show notes. Also, please like us on whichever platform you're listening to us on. It really helps us. So thank you for joining us. We will see you again on the next episode of The Catholic Entrepreneur.